When I was 19 when I had a random moment of discovery of this other side of life, and I was just like, oh my God, this is what life is really about. And I'd never heard of it. And I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was the great reality of things, but I had it was back in the early 80s, and I had absolutely nowhere to turn. I didn't know where to go for guidance on it. So that's part of my own personal sort of mission, is actually to make this much more widely known, so that because people can randomly awaken to it, and they do. I often have people writing to me about it. I want people to know it's real, and there are methods for not only uncovering it but integrating it if it happens, and learning to live with it. And so I have that mission too, that it should be more widely known, just because because it's real, but also B, because sometimes people stumble into it and they don't know what's happened to them, and it can be very worrying for some people. They think they're going mad, or no, they've just actually seen the way things really are. It's a bit like the Matrix. It's a little bit like the Matrix, except that it's not horrible giant insects ruling everything. Instead, it's a marvelous reality. It's a beautiful world that opens up.
Hi, my name is Wei Ting. I'm the host of Founder Meditations. Today, I'm very excited and thrilled to host two guests today, Henry Shukman and Jack Shukman, with us today. Welcome, gentlemen.
Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So Henry and Jack, for those of our audience who may not too familiar with your background, can you please do a very quick short introduction for yourself?
Yeah, I'm Henry Shukman, and I've been in the world of meditation one way or another for about 35 years. And I started in my early to mid-20s, out of a dire need for it, really, and then went through a long, deep, I hope I can say deep, Zen training with several teachers in a lineage called Sanbo Zen. Then I was leading a Zen center in the US called Mountain Cloud Zen Center, and for the last 4 years or so I've been leading online meditations, a program I called Original Love, which is a twist on Original Face, that's talked about in Zen. And also with Jack, my nephew, we founded an app which we think is the first of its kind, a single long-term pathway, no-choice pathway of meditation practice. I'm also an author and poet. I published a number of books, with a new one coming out actually this July 2024 called Original Love.
Amazing. And Jack?
Man, Henry's bio is always so much more impressive than mine, so I'm going to keep it shorter. But basically, I'm Henry's nephew, and I have had a 10-year career in the corporate world, 5 years as an investment banker, and then 5 years as a strategy consultant. And I'm, unlike Henry, much newer to the world of meditation practice. I've been meditating for coming up to 2 years. Really, I would say that I maybe dabbled a little bit before, but 2 years since I've had a more serious practice. Still very much a novice, very much a beginner, just really very, very grateful to now get the chance to work with Henry as a founder of our meditation app.
Yes, and congratulations to Jack and Henry for founding this amazing startup. So I wonder, Henry, you're a well-regarded Zen teacher. You're on Sam Harris's Waking Up app. That's also where I discovered you first a few years ago. And as we know, there are many, many meditation apps out there, from Headspace to Calm to Waking Up to Insight Timer. Just curious, what made you want to create yet another meditation app?
Yes, that's exactly what a lot of people ask me. But the answer is very simple, that I believe there's a place for systematic teaching of meditation in an app form. The old model of meditation training is typically, if you went somewhere and you got trained in essentially one system. It may be that, at a certain point you were encouraged to go and explore other methods and systems. But somewhere in your life as a meditator, you would have one deep, longish period of training. So I've always thought, I love particularly the Waking Up app. Actually, it's been a great thing for me to have been invited to offer a couple of courses there and some conversations with Sam Harris. But like nearly all the others that I've seen, and in fact I don't really know of another meditation app that doesn't do this, all the apps are about essentially libraries of content, and the user goes in and has wonderful choices about what to do as their meditation path. You can do 10 sessions on this and 12 sessions on that and 6 sessions on this. But there isn't in any of them that I've seen a single long-term path. We thought, Jack and I, in a way, that we needed to create something like Duolingo for meditation, an actual teaching. This is how you can learn to do it, and we're going to eliminate choice. So every day you just get one thing to do, which is the next sit, and that was the thinking, like how to help people really get into this by giving them a choice-free path, and that would include kind of getting into the major areas of growth and development and openings that meditation can, of course, foster. So it actually includes a kind of broader vision of what meditation is for than, say, just stress reduction, although that's, of course, critically important. So that's a little snippet of the thinking behind it.
Yeah, I guess I just want to tag something onto that, which is that just my personal experience as a beginner meditator. I was casting around. I tried a bunch of different apps as well, and it was really hard to find something that was both programmatic and systematic, but also was going to really take me kind of into the deep end. Awakening, non-duality. I kind of had this interest in exploring this, but didn't really know how to go about it. And actually, of course, those topics have their own confusions, which we can talk about. But actually, finding really kind of clear guidance on these topics, I found really, really difficult. It's still quite inaccessible, and that was something that we heard from a lot of people that we spoke to when we were researching. It's like, it's not everyone has the time or the financial resources to go on retreat, to travel to different places in the world where this kind of teaching can be, and so those places are often quite kind of sequestered. So for us, sort of making that kind of teaching accessible was one of the kind of big motivations.
Those are amazing points, because drawing from my own experiences, I've been learning how to meditate mostly by myself for the past 3 or 4 years. In the first few years, I've been trying out basically almost all meditation apps out there. And I think one thing that I've learned is that I've later discovered is actually it's very well possible for someone to continue to try out those apps, but would not have made as much progress as they would think, because there's no guidance and there's actually no way for them to know whether the type of meditation that they are diligently practicing covers enough grounds, or whether they're doing things wrong. And from my personal experience, I went to my first Vipassana 10-day retreat end of 2022. That was actually the first time that I felt like because it was a very structured guidance. It was the first time I feel like I'm actually learning how to meditate by myself, even though before that, I feel like I was quite diligent. I was doing a 20-minute sit continuously on a daily basis. But it was actually after going on a live, in-person retreat with guidance that I realized, this is what being taught how to meditate looks like. So it seems like this new app is a way to I guess, scale Henry, the Zen Master teacher, to enable everyone to have a Zen Master in their own pockets. Is that the right analogy here?
Yeah, in fact, that was nearly one of the taglines that we used on our website. So you're spot on, Waiting.
Yeah. How did this idea came together? How did was it Jack who first came with the idea? On what was the founding story of the way?
Jack, why don't you lead?
Yeah, I'll start. Yeah, I think that you know what, Henry had been teaching in person for many years, and then COVID came along, and that in-person teaching had to stop and move online. So it was a sort of forcing mechanism for an initial translation of a in-person curriculum to an online curriculum. And that proved really, really popular. And so that was, I think, the germ of the idea, the seed for an even more scalable thing, which would make sense to be an app. And then on my side, I had come to the end of my time in the consulting world, and I was looking for a new challenge, a new thing to work on. And actually, I'd taken some time out to go traveling. And in that time, really coincidentally, had got into meditation. Actually, there was a really kind of singular moment in my life when I had this realization that many of the concepts I'd taken for granted in my life, actually the kind of foundations were a bit shaky. You know, sort of what is it to have a mind? What is it to be a conscious human? What is reality? I thought I knew the answer, but it turns out I didn't. And I called Henry that same day asking for some guidance, and kind of expecting that he could point me to like a single book or a podcast that would just clear it all up. And he just said, well, you have to meditate. That's the only thing that humans have figured out that can answer these questions. So for me, that was the sort of start of a more kind of dedicated practice. And then later in that same trip, a few months later, my wife and I went to stay with Henry. And we got kind of talking about it, and it just seemed like this wonderful coincidence or synchronicity that there was this idea of the single path, and Henry had been molding a curriculum and kind of putting those pieces together over the previous few years, and it was suddenly a topic that I was deeply passionate about and wanted to work in. Did I miss anything there, Henry? I feel that's kind of how it came about, right?
Yes, I think so. I remember at some point you sort of saying, not everybody has an uncle who's a meditation teacher and who they can call up for pointers, and you wanted to replicate that access in a certain sense. I think that was part of it. You know, there's the waiting. What you were just saying actually in your last remark about, I heard two things. One was that you didn't know how to know if you were making progress. And you also didn't know, you said something about this particular teaching, like you didn't know where the teaching you were receiving at any point fitted into an overall map of the possibilities of meditation. And you know, that's something I feel quite passionate about, that I love the way Waking Up, the app, has really put the experience of non-duality on the map for so many people, that there's been a lot of confusion about it in the past. And you know, 98% of people who meditate probably think that the purpose of meditation is stress reduction and helping the nervous system. And they're absolutely right, but that's only a part of the whole territory that meditation can open up. It's a critical one. It's really important that we have our nervous systems in better shape, because you know, our nervous systems are basically how we experience the world. They are our kind of gateway to the world, or our experience of the world is absolutely grounded in the state of our nervous system. So it's critical that we learn how to recognize what kind of state our CNS is in, and also learn methods for helping it restore an equilibrium, and to know how to switch on the parasympathetic system to calm down, and dial down the sympathetic side of the nervous system that brings on the fight and flight response. But that's really only entry-level meditation, actually, from the point of view of the deep old traditions. So when somebody is exposed to whatever method it might be in meditation, they won't know how comprehensive a view of the whole path that method or tradition or school offers. And actually, one of the key things that I was trying to develop, as Jack was talking about during COVID, when we were sort of transferring our way of teaching from in-person and in-place to online, was exactly to be building out a simple map that would let people know what are the core possibilities of meditation. It's probably not a comprehensive map, but it covers the basic areas that are critical, to the way meditation can help us. And in that map, you can sort of see, well, where am I in this zone? Where am I in this zone? This other zone, and to just really have a proper, a deeper, wider, broader understanding of these facets of our own humanity that meditation can help us with. And then through having our pathway that kind of weaves through these different territories or facets of our human nature, really, we can start to get a sense of, well, how am I doing on this side? How am I doing on this side? And so really, and of course the pathway is supposed to help us, in each of those areas to get more grounded, more settled, and more open, and have more space to allow us to navigate our lives helpfully and effectively.
So Henry, you mentioned about the term non-duality and awakening. For the startup founders or other people who work in tech who meditate on Calm or Headspace, mainly for stress reduction, can you share with people in the audience more about what does it mean when you say non-duality and awakening?
Sure. Thank you for asking that. I mean, broadly speaking, there are two ways that we humans have figured out for approaching our own personal suffering and our interpersonal and collective suffering. And the first way, which is the one that most of us are aware of, is simply how to, in terms of personal suffering, how to change the way we respond to difficult situations by addressing our nervous systems and adjusting them and soothing and calming and different forms of therapeutic intervention to help us, and we may of course also be learning to behave and act more helpfully and less harmfully for ourselves and for others. But that's one whole way of approaching the problem of suffering, which we would think on the face of it would be the only way, like to try to actually dial down the causes of suffering and try to dial down the inward responses and causes of suffering. That would seem very logical, and that's what else can you do? But actually, there's been a radically different approach in all the great wisdom traditions. In some traditions it's been a very small part of what they offer, and in some it's been a larger, more forward-facing part of what they offer. But there is another approach to human suffering, which is really radical, and it's kind of, on the face of it, paradoxical, and it doesn't seem to make any sense until we ourselves catch a glimpse of it. And what that other approach is that rather than trying to help ourself, rather than trying to help the self that we think we are, which suffers, in various ways. I mean, it has good times and bad times, of course, but it does. It's always liable to suffering and to having a hard time and to worrying about things getting worse, worry about not getting what it wants. Rather than trying to help that self, we study that self instead. And when we study it, we can come to see quite clearly, unequivocally, that it isn't what we think it is. There isn't actually the solid entity inside me, which I call me. When I really look at this thing that I think I sense and know and have always had here, that's called me, when I really study it, I see that it is only made up of thoughts. Some say it could also be made up of subtle muscular tensions. That may be true, but it's definitely made up of thoughts. And those thoughts are all it is. When we have thoughts of self, we think those thoughts are referring to this other thing called self, me. In fact, they're not, they're just thoughts. And when we discover that this thing we were so sure we were has actually been nothing but a thought, and that thought can stop, and we can be free of it, that actually what I was so convinced I really am is just a dream, it's just something imaginary, and that it can sort of evaporate, and we're free of it. There just isn't a self when we really study it. If we get that insight or that recognition, it's tremendously liberating. It's the most relieving thing, because then suddenly we find we're free and we're part of this whole world that's arising around us. We're part of it. We're not separate the way we had felt. So I don't know if I'm going off the deep end too much too soon. I probably am. But it's really, I think it's important to lay this out there, that there's a whole other way of approaching our lives, which is not based on the assumption that I am who I think I am. Instead, it's an investigation of that assumption, which leads to a clear insight. Man, I'm not here the way I'd always thought. And that is an amazing thing to discover, and it kind of changes everything. I'm going to have to stop here because I could just go on and on. But anyway, let's see. How's that landing for you guys?
So, say for a very busy startup founder who have historically see meditation as an effective way to reduce stress, as if it's a way to do mental fitness, just like startup founders like to go to gym to make themselves fit and healthy. I guess see the illusory self sounds spiritual, and for a busy founder who has been very busy working on his mission to change the world, I'll imagine they will ask, what's the benefit of awakening? And what would be a good sales pitch?
Yeah. I think maybe what I can suggest is let me speak to that from the beginner's perspective, and then we can throw it back to Henry for the Zen Master's perspective. Because I think that of course those are two very, we're talking about the same path, but those are two very different perspectives on it. And so what I can speak to from personal experience is that there's a few things that are that get layered in on top. So of course, there's still a big benefit of meditating, which is to keep a degree of calm, to reduce some of the stress that's always going to be there in a founder's day, in a founder's life. So I don't want to diminish that. That's still a very important part of the project. But what we can layer in on top of that when it comes to awakening is that actually, even for someone who's a beginner, who has just had a few brief glimpses, the smallest possible glimpses into this state of non-duality, into awakening, is that actually you can start to really see that, you know, your ego, your sense of self is it's just being generated. And so, and that actually means you can start making decisions, business decisions, career decisions, that are not necessarily through that lens. For a good example is like, I've made loads of decisions in the past at the different companies I work for, and it's like, what will that person or that team think of me if I do X? And I'm going to optimize for that because I'm so worried about this, this kind of image of me that's all just wrapped up in a story in my own head anyway. And actually, those are the sorts of things you can start to just see through and make decisions, clear decisions, without that whole construct. Of course, it's not that that never arises. It's not that that's like a binary thing and now every decision I make is free from the sense of ego. Of course not. But you can start to see that trying to cut through that illusion of the self can actually really help you see the true landscape, the true state of things more clearly and react to that better, I believe. And then I think the last point I'll make is that it can also change your intentions. I mean, your whole reason, the mission that you're working on as a founder. Of course, we're in a very specific, we're in the world of the sector of meditation. So, but this doesn't have to apply just to that. I think, as a founder, it can change the way you see your relationship to the world, your relationship to other people, and therefore your goals and your mission. And that can be a really, really powerful thing, again, for someone who's just starting out. And also the other thing as part of the sales pitch waiting is that it's also just like, it's achievable, right? This is not, you said you meditate for 60 minutes a day, like that's wonderful, but that's also not required. I mean, actually a founder who was already meditating in order to keep an even keel and de-stress for 10 or 20 minutes a day, that's enough, actually. And if you start to incorporate some of these awakening practices that we're talking about, and you don't need to sign up to any new faith, this can be as secular a mission. There's nothing you need to take on faith, right? There's no religious element to this. You can start to have some of these insights. So it really is very achievable. Sales pitch over.
Henry, do you have anything to add to that one?
Let me just maybe a couple points. Let me just see. I think Jack, you did a beautiful job there. I would probably want to say that there's a shift in perspective when it's one thing. First of all, it's one thing to have a glimpse of the non-dual. And by the way, it's just to be clear, it's called non-dual because it breaks down the basic duality of me in here and world out there. That's two. That I'm this thing and the world is everything else. And so that's the basic duality that people are referring to when they say non-duality, because it's broken down the divide between self and other being everything else that's not me and me. That's the basic duality that is broken when we have this insight into selflessness. But because of that, it takes a while. I mean, it's one thing to have a glimpse of that, and there's another thing to really integrate it so that it becomes accessible, more or less on demand. We just remember it and boom, oh yeah, here it is, and just see it immediately. Perhaps never perfectly. I would certainly, in my case, not yet perfectly, but much more accessible, way more than it used to be. So what happens then is that the perspective is not just from me. It's how does this affect others? It's a larger perspective of self and others, or the whole is what are the implications of certain decisions and actions for this larger whole rather than just me. That's a important thing. I'm feeling this little story bubbling up from the early days of the historical Buddha, when a farmer came to see him, and sort of came before the great teacher Shakyamuni Buddha and said, look, I wanted to see you because I've got so many problems. My crops are failing, my workers are terrible, they keep having extra long lunch breaks and they don't show up, and meanwhile at home my kids are really rebellious, and the Buddha interrupts him and says, I know, you've got 83 problems. And the farmer says, what do you mean I've got 83 problems? How do you know? He says, well, everybody has 83 problems. It doesn't matter if you solve one, another one will take its place. Everybody will always have 83 problems. And the farmer says, well, okay, but please help me. And Buddha says, I can't help you with that. I can't help you with that. And the farmer says, well, you're the great teacher. What use are you? And the Buddha says, well, you also have an 84th problem. And that one I can help you with. And the farmer says, well, what's my 84th problem? And the Buddha says, it's that you don't want to have any problems. And that one I can help you with. And I think there's a truth to this, that when our adherence or allegiance to the sense of self is weaker, what seems like a problem can change. It no longer seems like a problem. It's just what is, and we just respond to it the way that's most, as far as we can tell, wisest. And that way of living and responding, in a sense, in a problem-free world. I mean, what an amazing thing to contemplate. That we look around the world and we see nothing but problems. But what if actually, in a certain way, there are no problems? Of course, things may not be working out optimally, but but they're working out at the moment as they must, and we can do what we can to change causes and conditions so that things work out in new ways that are more beneficial for more people. But we're not coming at it from the sense of a me trying to fix everything. Instead, from a more comprehensive and broader perspective that's more about trying to help things flow and unfold in less harmful ways. That takes more people into account.
I think it sounds like awakening is something that's definitely achievable by normal people. For people who are listening who grew up in relatively religious families, for example, I'm originally from Taiwan, and most people in Taiwan, I guess they follow the localized version of Buddhist, Taoist. For a lot of people, they would think that awakening is something that could only be achieved by monks, by experienced monks who meditate, work hard at it, somewhere deep in the mountains for 30, 40 plus years. And even those masters will not be as much insight as, say, the Buddha himself. So it could be quite shocking to hear that it is something that's achievable by everyone. Can you please elaborate a bit on this?
In the Zen tradition, there's always been, two primary categories of practitioners. Of course, the monastics, men and women, predominantly men. But there's also been an emphasis on lay practice. And there's even a notion in Zen that the monastery is a training ground for your life in the world. In other words, that you might go to a monastery for a period of years, but the kind of target zone is the world, the marketplace. There's a famous map of Zen training called the 10 ox-herding pictures, and the 10th or last picture is being back in the marketplace. It says, "In the marketplace with gift-bestowing hands" is the caption. So whatever training you've been through, it's actually not designed, or it's not hoped that it will result in a sequestered monastic life, but rather in a life in the world. I mean, my own Zen master in Japan Yamada Roshi, he's been a businessman all his life. He teaches maybe almost 100 worldwide Zen teachers. You know, they come to him for more instruction, you know, guidance. So he's a very sort of senior figure in the world of Zen. But he's actually still, at the age of 84, he's still the chairman of a big company that makes office furniture with 3,000 employees, you know. And he's never, I mean, people ask it, I've asked him, you know, how do you manage to do both your very serious Zen life and this very serious business life, two worlds? And he says that for him it's not a two worlds, it's just one world. And he doesn't regard practice as a thing that only belongs in the Zendo or in the monastery or the temple. No, it belongs in the world. So whether he's sitting in a tatami floor talking to 70 or 80 Zen teachers, or whether he's in the office, you know, dealing with spreadsheets and stuff, it's actually, from his point of view, it's the same world that, you know, he cannot separate the two. Anyway, that's just a note there.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just add very quickly onto that. I know that the word achievable and awakening, probably there's something to pick up there, like, is achievable the right word? Do you really achieve awakening? Henry's much better placed than me to answer that one, but I just would note that we recognise that achievable is probably the wrong word to use. But nonetheless, for simplicity, when we're talking about, you know, having these moments, with the ox herding pictures that Henry mentioned, you know, there's definitely there's you know, seeing the ox and is it reaching the ox, right? But then capturing the ox. Yeah. But there's also just seeing, you know, the tail of the ox or the left ear of the ox. And, you know, actually there's of course in the Zen tradition and in the literature, and Henry can talk about it as well, like these really in huge kind of awakening moments, also called kensho, you know, where you're fully interwoven into the fabric of the cosmos. But there's also these small, just glimpses, we call them, where maybe for a split second you just, the light bulb goes off, I just see things differently, just for a flash. And that's actually when we talk to our students of the way, of the app, those are much more common. Those are the kind of reports we get that, I was just sitting, or I was walking down the street after doing a sit, and I just kind of suddenly saw that actually I wasn't there, and then I was back, you know, and then my day kind of gone on like normal. But I just, as someone who's just at the beginning of a meditation journey, I'm very kind of, you know, heartened and encouraged that awakening comes in these little bite-sized morsels as we practice.
Yeah, I think that was a good segue to jump into the startup and the app, the way and how it works and how it helps its users to achieve awakening. So, gentlemen, what is deeper meditation? You use the word deeper meditation. What's the difference versus regular meditation?
It's not a perfect term, but it's the best term that we can come up with to signify the difference that we've been talking about between a meditation project that's focused on just de-stressing and calming yourself versus one that's focused on seeing through the illusion of the self and understanding the true nature of reality and your relationship to the world and all these things. And that's something that the way the meditation app is very much focused on. And awakening and non-duality and everything we've been talking about would fall into that category.
I would add also that, you know, I see a couple of things there as well that aren't always clearly delineated, you know, in the world of meditation, which is that we can easily think of meditation as a solitary matter, that we do it the same way we, as you said earlier, like might go to the gym and, you know, do our reps, get fitter so we can get fitter in mind by doing some meditation. And it's for us, you know. But actually, I think there's something missing in that model, which is that meditation is also about discovering how much we are supported, how much we are connected, and that we don't live actually independently. You know, so many causes and conditions allow us to be alive, and our life is not an isolated thing. It's just this particular skin bag that is mine, you know, and I'm in it, you know, is constantly being nourished and supported by all these other elements. And meditation actually, I believe, can be a path for discovering, not necessarily with awakening, just getting a greater sense of support and connection. And that comes naturally as we sit more. It can also lead to beautiful flow states, you know, where the sense of time seems to go quiet, the sense of effort goes quiet, and we feel carried by something, and, you know, can have a very deeply blissful time in meditation that may not actually be awakening, but it's still wonderful, and it's deeper than just reducing stress. We switch gear in some way. And so, you know, I just noting that there are perhaps other dimensions to the term deeper meditation, although I agree with Jack totally that the primary one would be about this discovery, this shift in how we see things based on a sense of self, or seeing through a sense of self.
Yeah, Henry, you have this unique approach to meditation with these 4 key zones that you briefly mentioned. Can you please share more about these 4 zones?
Yeah, happily. I mean, what the 4 zones are in Henry's view, and by the way, this is not, this is, in a way, this is just my adjustment of some other teaching schemes that are very old, but there's a old teaching in Zen that goes back to the 6th century that says there are 4 kinds of practice. And then there's another one from, I think, the 10th century that says that, no, there are 5 kinds of practice. So I've just adjusted it into terminology for today, which is that the first zone of practice is mindfulness. It's learning to be more present in a kind of balanced and stable way that calms the nervous system and opens us up more to the richness of experience here and now, both outward, and also opens us up to our inward experience, our thoughts and feelings, becoming more aware of them and more able to appreciate them and cherish them and be loving towards ourselves and the experience we're having, and towards other people. I call all of that is under the bracket of mindfulness. And then there's this, we call it zone 2, which is opening up to connectedness, to the fact that we do not actually live independently. Of course, we have responsibility ourselves for how we navigate life and help others and so on, and reduce harm. But we are made up of all these things that are sort of given to us, that support our life. You know, our very flesh is supported by what we're allowed to eat, are given to eat, and, you know, of course we breathe every breath, every moment, the air is supporting us, and so on. And then there's all the people in our lives who without whom we wouldn't be alive, or our ancestors, the culture we live in, and so on. There's just that recognizing the degree to which we aren't isolated, independent entities, I think is an important dimension of practice, and it's also where we can, you know, our hearts can become more tender, we can appreciate music and beauty and poetry, and, you know, just have a sort of deeper side to life that opens up for us. But that's, again, it's not about awakening to the non-dual, it's just about deepening in our sense of belonging in this world and being connected. And then the third zone for us is about absorption or flow states. These are recognized in the great traditions. They They call it either samadhi or jhana states is a term in Buddhism. It's about the sense of self goes quiet. It's not so much that we see through it, but it goes quiet and we sort of switch gear and we feel that we're carried by energies and by the moment and by experience right now, and don't have to do so much. In fact, we need to do very little. Of course, athletes, musicians, and people working intensely on some project will sometimes get into flow states, and there's a lot of research on them that's been going on. There was a famous guy, Csikszentmihalyi, who studied at the University of Chicago, who studied flow states beginning in the 1970s, who found that the more somebody tastes flow in their life, generally the happier they are, the more satisfied with life they are. And meditation has always had this side to it that the traditions have known about, of getting into these states they call samadhi, which are really flow states, basically. And then the fourth quote-unquote zone is about non-duality. But we sort of, I think that these first three zones are totally valuable, and so I kind of disagree a little bit with some traditions that say it's all about awakening. Awakening is the only thing that matters. You've got to get clear on who you really are, who you really aren't. I totally agree how important that is, but I actually think the other things are important as well. And we need to have a kind of integrated, wholesome path of practice if we're going to be maximally helpful in this world.
And so that's actually exactly the journey that we lead a user on in the app. So we start with mindfulness and we break that down into some key topics, the outer senses, the inner senses, the hindrances. Then we move them on to support, that second zone. And again, there's a kind of breakdown of key topics there. Then to flow, and all of this is taking place over months, like it's a long-term course. And then after flow, they're ready for and a kind of an immersion into that fourth zone of awakening. So it's highly structured, and the advantage of that is that we have the best chance at preparing a student actually for then arriving at that that awakening into the kind of awakening realm. And of course, there's no guarantee that it's going to click, it's going to work, right? That's one of the perpetual mysteries and frustrations of the non-dual reality. But what we do is that at the end of that awakening section of the curriculum, it doesn't end. We then start to go back through the same four zones: mindfulness, support, flow, awakening, but at a deeper level. And so that everyone has multiple chances to kind of connect with all the teaching, and it's sort of just it just continues going deeper and deeper and touching on the same topics from multiple angles, hopefully in a very kind of fulfilling and productive from a meditative journey perspective.
Another friend told me about the app a few weeks ago, and I've actually been using the app for my daily meditation in the past few days. So it's actually very well made. So congratulations. And as you can see, this is really a one-way street. There's absolutely no choice whatsoever. I cannot skip ahead. So I've been and it's very, very well designed. So I highly recommend anyone to try this out. And I've been recommending to other Y Combinator founders about this as well. So if it's thank you. This is amazing. So if it's a one-directional app that takes the user on a journey all the way to awakening, do you have any idea on how long it would take?
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess I would say that we don't have enough data yet from our users to say, and of course, awakening can strike at any moment. Based on all the years of Henry's teaching, we've structured it so that there is roughly a 90-day training period through those first zones of mindfulness, support, flow before we come to awakening. So there's obviously there's a good chance that at that 90-day mark, we get into the really deep stuff, and hopefully something clicks. But it's very, very possible, of course, that it won't happen, and that a future section of the curriculum might be what leads it. And actually, man, in my own experience, I've done multiple different courses on various apps, some very targeted in awakening, some not, and the few moments of the glimpses I've had all happen months afterwards, when I wasn't even sitting down. I was in a taxi, and so there's always this element of unpredictability. So I think, I don't know, Henry, if you have anything to add, but I would love to be able to say, hey, on day 105, it's going to happen for you, but I don't think that will ever be possible, unfortunately.
Yeah, beautifully put, Jack. I also think that there's so much value in the other dimensions of meditation, so that, and by the way, we cycle round and round. So right now we're almost at 1 year of content, and we're just holding off on creating whatever the second year is going to be while we get more data. But there probably will be a second year, so it's not like and somebody could, of course, repeat anything they want any number of times. So when it's a year of content, it may be more than a year that somebody takes to complete that quote-unquote year. But the real thing, I think, is like Jack said, glimpses of awakening are unpredictable, and they kind of must be, because if somebody's trying to have a glimpse of awakening, their self is active. Only their sense of self will be wanting awakening. To want awakening is for the self to be active. So the very wanting of it is actually the obstacle to it, in a paradoxical way. And Zen talks about this quite a bit, actually. So how do we seek awakening without seeking it? How do we try to have a non-dual glimpse without trying to? And the only way that I know is to acknowledge that it's a possibility and then forget about it. So we acknowledge it's a possibility, and then we practice in the way that we trust may bring us to it. But we just let the practice do whatever it does. So we're not trying anymore, except we're trying to do the practice consistently and as diligently as we can. And honestly, my metric for success of our app is not necessarily how many people are having glimpses of non-duality. It's more how many people are finding that they can really love meditation and want to keep doing it. So I think the most important thing is that we help people develop the daily practice. I think that's the most important thing. Then whatever fruits may come, and we've got these 4 gorgeous trees with lovely fruit, mindfulness, support and connectedness, flow, and possibly non-dual awakening. They're all the fruit of all those 4 trees, or even orchards, are marvelous. And if somebody loves meditation, learns to love it enough that they keep doing it every day, or through thick and thin, they just keep doing it, the fruits will come in their own time. The trees will ripen, the seasons will develop as they need to, and the fruit will ripen, and it will fall when it falls. But meantime, the user, the student, has developed this absolutely critical keystone habit of having some quiet and stillness every day in their day, which helps to grow awareness and grow, I think, love. That's a critical part of the whole equation for me, is loving meditation and loving life and loving ourselves and loving others and loving this world and being guided by that love in all our activities and decisions.
Yeah. So this podcast is all about the intersection between spirituality, meditation, and technology. And Jack and Henry, you guys are building a meditation startup. So I'm curious, what happens when a Zen Master founded a startup company? What's running a startup in the meditation space like right now?
Well, shall I speak? Shall I speak first, as you asked about the Zen teacher side? Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. I mean, for me, it's been just marvelous because I've been sort of forced to do some of these, and I might not have done it otherwise, or at least I might not have done it in such a systematic way, which is to really create an experiential path of training. Rather than, I've written about it, I've talked about it, I've done random guided meditations a lot over the last few years, but not like this really carefully curated pathway. And going into the studio, not I can't say every day, but a lot, to record carefully thought out sequences of meditations. This one, and then this next one will build on the previous one, and so on. The whole thing is kind of carefully planned. I wouldn't have done it, I think, without this structure of our startup. And I've been just insanely lucky to have a nephew who is just a brilliant team leader. He's a brilliant CEO. He's got extraordinary energy, but great insight. And so he's made a lot of decisions. He's made more decisions than me, way more, and they've all been fantastic. And he sort of tells me what he really wants me to do. And sometimes I think, no, I don't want to do it that way. But then I try, and actually it works. It works better. And so, it's been a great privilege and a really fortunate thing for me. So that's my short answer, Waiting, thanks.
On my side, it's been similarly awesome. I never thought, I always wanted to work in a startup. I never was really sure that I would found my own startup, but I was always very interested in tech and early stage companies. So to find myself a founder, but also a co-founder with my uncle, I never thought that would happen, but it's awesome. It's awesome because it just has a really nice family vibe. That's a big part of it. And also having a Zen Master on the team, our team meetings sound a lot like this conversation, actually. We go down loads of rabbit holes about non-duality and about flow states. And actually that's just really, really fun. And to kind of be working on the problem of helping people fall in love with deeper meditation is just kind of like, an incredibly kind of motivating and rewarding mission for us. And so, as a team, actually, we have a really, really wonderful time with it. Sometimes we have to end the Zoom call after we've gone really down too many rabbit holes, and we have to kind of bring it back to okay, well, what are we really going to deliver next week? It's really, really wonderful.
Yeah, I thought it'd be really fun for us to put on a TechCrunch/Hacker News hat and start to learn more about how's the way the startup behind closed doors. I'm just curious, how many people do you guys have how much funding? What's the funding situation? Yeah,
we have a small but wonderful team. We have our product designer, Emma, and founding engineer, James. And we have also someone who helps us with marketing and kind of community management, Jeremy. And then there's Henry and me. So there's really just 5 of us. So we're keeping it very lean while we build out the first version of the product. And we were really, really fortunate to also have a wonderful mentor and advisor in the form of Kevin Rose, who is also a tech entrepreneur and a VC and has been a figure in Silicon Valley for many years, and also has a really serious meditation practice that he's been working with Henry for many years as well. And so he was incredibly helpful and supportive and generous with his time and guided us through the process of raising some seed investment to build the MVP that we launched in February this year.
That's amazing. So speaking of Kevin Rose, fun fact, the very first meditation app that I used maybe 4 or 5 years ago was the one called Oak.
Yeah.
I thought it was done by Kevin Rose.
Correct, yeah.
I downloaded it because they had this course called Mantra Meditation, which I guess is their take on transcendental meditation. The app was also quite well made, and that got me successfully creating this habit of meditating on a daily basis. So in a way, I've also have Kevin Rose to thank as
That's
the
awesome.
early, I guess, the early virtual mentor of mine who created this wonderful app early on. So I have Kevin to thank as well.
Well, hopefully Oak will be your first meditation app, and the Way will be your last meditation app, because you won't need another
I think
one.
so as well. I think so as well. So since this is a startup, how do you measure success? I guess Henry mentioned about potential important metrics, but is there a single North Star metric that the team strives for?
It's a great question. We, as any consumer app would, look at some of the kind of classic metrics. So we look at user growth, we look at user retention. We use those metrics really as a proxy for what we're really trying to get a signal on, which is, are we helping people to meditate? And so, of course, at the moment, the more people who we can help to meditate, the more that will use the app, and the more who will come back to the app, which is hopefully the kind of virtuous cycle that we're trying to set up. So, those are sort of the metrics that we look at day to day, as any sort of startup in our situation would.
Well, I was just going to add that there's a really happy alignment between, what in startup world would be called retention, and on my side I would just call it habit building. In other words, the more that we can be helping somebody to really learn to carve out the little bit of time, which actually it turns out it doesn't need to be carved out. You just do it, to get them to do it every day. That's the gold standard for me. It's just, can we help people do it every day? And it turns out that that's almost the same as retention, if you see what I mean. So that's a happy thing, that we don't have to think of it as either a growth building thing for our app or it's a habit. It's one and the same. If people are helped to do it daily, that's exactly what we are here for. And it will, of course, I suppose it'll have a knock-on positive effect on the business, which is fine because we want it to be sustainable.
One thing I'm always curious is, are there any goals that the team has for each quarter? The reason I'm asking is, I was under the impression that in Zen, it could be considered as bad form to have expectations or cling to a certain outcome. But if you're running a startup, I assume it's also important to have goals for the team to strive for. So I'm curious, what's the right way to balance this?
Yeah, I can just speak briefly to that. What I've been told always by my teachers is it's fine to have hopes for results, but don't be attached to them. And you start to learn what it means, whether I'm attached or not attached to outcomes. If I'm not attached, I feel an openness and I feel free and light. There may be some tenderness in the heart about something, but I'm not tight and gripping, and so it's always a point of practice for me to check in. Am I getting attached to some outcome that I think would be positive, but am I attached to it? The Zen way is to not be attached, to release it. Doesn't mean we don't try to make this world a happier place in whatever ways we believe in, but it just means we're not clinging or grasping or tightening around a specific result. We're open. And that, it feels kind of good.
Yeah, I really love this question. It's something I think about a lot, because there does seem to be, a tension there. It's like, we've got to ship, right? We've got to iterate the product, we've got to get stuff done, and we want to hopefully increase our number of users and so on and so on. But yet, how can we make that not the be-all and end-all, and that's just kind of all we care about, and how you have this attachment to an outcome that fundamentally we can't really control, or can't control at all. It's hard, actually, but something I'm really trying to think about myself is like, how do we find fulfillment in the process and feel pride in just the work itself, the interactions as a team, and feel good about the next release that we're going to ship, and keep one eye on what the metrics are, of course, but not base how we feel every day on what those are doing, but just that the work itself is enough, and that's where we find fulfillment.
Hey, that's beautiful, Jack. Thank you. I just want to add something that Jack has instituted. One was he decided early on we would have a 4-day week.
Oh, wow.
Now, many people in tech would just think, what? You can't do that. But he's absolutely right. We've been insanely quick at getting to where we've got to. So we're told by our investors. They're saying, man, how did you guys do this so fast? Answer, with a 4-day week. We've been so much more efficient because of that. Secondly, I think, Jack and I kind of got this idea early on that we're just learning. We're just a learning machine. We're much more interested in learning than in results. We made that a sort of high priority, to be thinking of ourselves as a learning. The whole thing, the whole app itself is a learning experiment, basically. So with that attitude, it's really different. You don't feel so attached to results.
Jack, what's the reasoning behind the 4-day work week?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's more of a topic in Europe and the UK than the States. But there's a lot of research to show that actually teams can be more productive on a 4-day work week. And the reason for that is that, and I have much of direct experiences myself, like on Friday, you're tired from the week. How much work do you actually really get done? I think everyone will know that kind of tired or maybe a little bit hungover kind of Friday, where you're just looking at the clock and kind of waiting for the day to end. And actually, if you instead take that day to recharge or to spend time with your friends and family or whatever it is you want to do, the volume of high productivity work that you fit in Monday to Thursday, and those are going to be full days, right? Full and sometimes very intense days, getting a lot of stuff done. But the productivity you can fit into those 4 days is higher than the 5 days you would do Monday to Friday. And of course, we're a startup, so we're not going to pretend like we can shut laptops at 4 p.m. on a Thursday and we don't have to think about everything, right? There's often times when we do have to log on and check things, but generally it's been a huge productivity hack for us.
I understand the following question can be quite amusing to ask, but if you were to fly to the Silicon Valley, go onto Sand Hill Road and start doing fundraising for your next round, if a venture capitalist were to ask you, so Jack and Henry, how big can this get? What's the total addressable market? How big is the TAM? What was your answer to that?
There's a few different moving parts here, so let me try and sort of give you a concise answer, but that touches on all the important points. The meditation market depends exactly who you ask and which report you read, but is broadly meant to be $20 billion globally by 2030. Right, so that's a big market, and that breaks down into 4 key verticals, which is apps, books, online courses, and in-person centers and schools. And actually apps is the smallest of those verticals, about 15 to 20%. And so actually when it comes to deeper meditation, that is taught primarily actually not in the app vertical, right? That exists there's books and there's online courses and there's in-person centers. So because that we are playing in that deeper meditation space rather than just the stress relief like a Calm or a Headspace, actually we can address in the whole market. We're not limited to one vertical, and actually there's lots of examples of meditation, deeper meditation, actually not being taught that well or that healthily or that fulfillingly or productively. It's completely unregulated, right? Anyone can put a hat on and say they're a meditation teacher and set up an online course. And so actually we do see that for something that is really a very solid, product that can really actually help people go on that journey that we're hoping we can take them on, that we can actually convert across the rest of the space. So that's a little bit what I'd say if I was pitching.
Yeah, and I would say, man, meditation is still growing, and it's grown crazily in the last 20 to 30 years. And when I started, it was fringe. You were strange if you did it. It was, it was sort of, you were an offshoot of yoga, which was already strange, and it's changed completely. Like now, I think the research is something like half of all US adults have tried meditation, and some, I don't know what the percentage is that it breaks down to that do it consistently, but I think Headspace has had 170 million downloads. I think the total addressable market has to be at least 1 billion people worldwide. It has to be, and we are incredibly well positioned to be a comprehensive training program that is in the most accessible form imaginable on your phone. A comprehensive training in meditation. I think it could be enormous.
Man, Henry's better at the Silicon Valley pitches than I am.
But look, it's not just about meditation, it's meditation towards a happier, kinder world. It's of all the interventions that you can make to make this world a kinder place. I don't know that anything is, of course I'm a little bit partisan because I've been meditating decades, but I see the potential benefits of meditation for a kinder world are just incomparable, I think, because you're getting right into people's nervous systems where they most need the help, and you're making it maximally accessible and incredibly cheap. Even if we offer scholarships, free total scholarships, no questions asked. If you want one, right, and you have one. But also, even if you're paying our annual subscription, it's insanely good value. You could, if you wanted the kind of coaching in meditation, the kind of training we're giving in meditation, a single session, 1 hour session, will cost you more than our year-long subscription. So I just think we could really change the face, not just of meditation, but of this world by creating so many more people who have a kinder, more loving sense of being alive.
Yeah. Speaking of a kinder world, what's your take on your competition? Who do you see are your competitors?
It's tough, right? Because of course, there are many meditation apps out there. So if you just take a view of any meditation app is a competitor, then there's thousands, right? And there's a few really big ones. We've already talked about Calm and Headspace. But if take the view of actually your competitor is someone who can offer a long-term structured path of training, then it's really hard. There are a couple of books that lay out a really clear curriculum. The Mind Illuminated by Tudor Dasa is a good example, right? But that's another attempt to really kind of structure a course. I'm sure there are other ones as well, but there isn't really a place to go to get this kind of depth of teaching in a structured format.
I agree. And what about your exit strategy? Is there one? Do you all aspire to sell the company eventually and become billionaires?
Henry, maybe I can answer first. Then please jump in. But we're so early, right? We only launched our MVP just over 2 months ago. For us, what's important is the mission, and the mission is helping people learn to love deeper meditation. And that's what counts. And to the extent that the app is successful, then whatever we can generate from that will go towards the mission. I mean, there's many other things we can do, not least expanding the app, increasing the duration of the syllabus, the curriculum. There's lots of ways to kind of improve the product that will take a bigger team. And so we would reinvest in that. And then also, there's lots of other things that are like online events and live events in person to help kind of foster communities who are interested in this and who want to kind of deepen their practice. So all of that, of course, would be take different degrees of investment. So that's what any success that the app finds would just be channeled towards that mission.
I agree. I mean, to be honest, I just don't think about it at all. I'm sorry, waiting. I just don't think about it at all because there's so many successive steps that and this is all good right now.
So the app has this amazing mission of trying to spread awakening to as many people as possible. So this could be a great segue to talk more about the benefits of awakening and how we can get more people and potentially more high-achieving founders and entrepreneurs to be on this journey. As we've discussed before, up until now, the main sales pitch for meditation for most people is mostly about stress reduction, mental health, which seems important, but still only one small aspect of one's lives. So I'm just curious if we were to try to get more people to be on this path, is there a better way to package this to make this more attractive for people to join this app and be on this journey?
And it's a really interesting question, and I like the meta strategy waiting you have of like, well, if we could get people who might build big businesses and followings and have a lot of kind of presence themselves into this crazy project of awakening, maybe that's going to be really helpful for the project overall. But yes, I see your point around the kind of need for a quote-unquote sales pitch to kind of convince someone who was maybe meditating before, but I don't need all this stuff you're talking about, man. I have a self is great. I don't need all that stuff. That just seems like extra work. I don't have a good answer, and it's something that we should think about more. But I can just speak from personal experience that just starting the very first kind of green shoots of the project of trying to see the sense of self for what it really is are just so helpful for me. I mean, it's just been really kind of night and day for how I see my life and my interactions with people in my life and what I'm meant to be doing. And so, I think a lot of those questions are something that founders think about, right? Like founders love talking about mission, and the life of a founder is constantly beset with these brutal challenges and questions of self-doubt. So actually, I think that founders, as a sort of segment of little sort of strata, little piece of the working world, are actually really prime beneficiaries. I mean, of course, everyone can benefit, but I can really see how, for founders, it's actually critical. Because you're going to get beset with challenges, right? Everyone, it's a common story. Things go wrong all the time on the founder's journey. But learning to not see that as... not have to react to that from a position of, oh my God, I'm not supposed to be here, I'm not supposed to be doing this, I suck, this was a big mistake, but to a place of, of no self, of these things are happening, it's unfolding as it was going to unfold, and I can still take decisions to affect the outcome, but my God, it's not a reflection on me, my sense of self. That's got to be helpful.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, I might also add, this sort of sense of purpose. When our sense of purpose is broader than just ourself, it's motivating in a beautiful way because, again, we're not just scrabbling to gratify and satisfy and assuage my own little me that's always hungry and always anxious, wants more affirmation, wants more recognition, and is always anxious. I mean, there's there's a friend of mine, actually, a colleague of mine, who's a Zen teacher and a great writer called David Loy. He's got a fantastic book called Money, War, Sex, Karma. It's well worth reading. And he's a Zen teacher, and he says the self is always anxious, and deep down, what it's anxious about is that it's not quite sure it really exists. The self itself is anxious about whether or not it exists. I think he's got a great point there. But if our sense of things is wider, and if that, when we taste that, I know I've used this word a lot, but our hearts have more love in them. They're more open. And when they're more open, we have more peace. And when we have more peace, we have a deeper sense of purpose. It's waiting. You asked earlier about that. The thing about having a goal or having intention about results. I think purpose is a nice response to that, because purpose exists independently of whether you actually get results. You hope to, and that drives you, and there's the purpose there. But if we really look at, Jack and I, what our purpose is, it's not really for the business, it's for the world. The purpose is to bring more peace and love and kindness, and therefore happiness, into this world, and to be dialing down the effects of rampant individualism, reducing the harm that rampant turbo-capitalist individualism can cause, and so why not use whatever tools we can, including being a startup? If the purpose is helping this world, and this is a way to do it, well, great.
I would just love to, while we're on this topic, I'd love to throw the question back to you as someone who sits very much at this intersection of the world of early stage tech companies, but also has experience in deep meditation. What your perspective on this is?
Yes. So to draw from my personal experience, I think there are two types of meditation. The first type would be the mental fitness type. So when I actually started doing that about 3-4 years ago, and the reason was, of course, all the smart people in the Silicon Valley, guys like Tim Ferriss talk about how amazing meditation was, and it was actually Ray Dalio, billionaire founder, author of Principles, who openly said that meditation, he has been doing transcendental meditation for the last 35-40 years, and he attributed, if there's one single thing that he will attribute his success to, that will be meditation. And he even openly said that recommending meditation to other people is the best gift that he could give to other folks. And so I took the bait. Right, I wanted to be like Ray Dalio, and I just started meditating as if it's a mental fitness regime, and it worked. I felt within weeks, thanks to Kevin Rose's Oak app, I became happier and more productive, and I kept on doing this for maybe about a year or so. Then, after reading more about Sam Harris's book, Waking Up, and also trying out Sam Harris's Waking Up app. Only until then it kind of flipped the switch to become more spiritual, because the previous apps, Calm, Headspace, none of those talk about the self being non-existent. It was actually Sam Harris for the first time that I realized, oh, this is interesting, and that's like the most important thing I've ever heard in my life. But nothing of this existed. And that was actually not my first motivation into the meditation journey. And I would actually suspect maybe a bait and switch could be beneficial here. And that's actually a follow-up question that I want to ask was, many startup founders look up to heroes. Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, and many founders try to imitate how they work, how they run their lives. So I wonder if there are any, I guess, heroes, role models that people can look up to that are successful and awakened. That could be very, very amazing and helpful to get people to be on this journey. I guess maybe Steve Jobs or Ray Dalio could be examples that I could think of that who all have achieved tremendous worldly success, who are also relatively spiritual or have an ongoing meditation practice as well. So I've always thought that if we can have more open role models who have achieved worldly success, who seems happy, who are doing great things to this world, and have a meditation habit, that could be a great way to motivate more people to be on this journey. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Waiting. I mean, I've been lucky because I've had this amazing Zen Master myself for the last 17 years. And prior to him, I had, and still I have other teachers as well. I mean, just a note on him, he's called Yamada Masamichi. That's his sort of, regular name, but he's Yamada Roshi for those of us who have been privileged to study with him. And he's based in Tokyo and Kamakura in Japan. Has two zendos, one in Tokyo, one in Kamakura, and works for this big company called Itoki. But actually which is office furniture company, like I said, with 3,000 employees, and he's the head of it. But actually that was only the job he took after he retired. He was with Mitsubishi for most of his career, and ended up, I think, very, very high up, like in sort of the one of the top three directors of Mitsubishi Securities, I believe. And he was head of Mitsubishi in Europe, based in London for several years, and he went to Harvard Business School as a young man, and he had a superbly successful business life. And he always said, actually, the same thing that you just said. He said, at Harvard, he was a reasonably good student, but he wasn't the best student at all. And in his first jobs, he was good, but not like outstanding. But the one thing that he had was that he sat every single day from the age of 16, and that meditation just somehow gave him an edge, and he wound up extremely successful. There's a story about him actually that people don't really believe this when I say it because it seems so outlandish, but he didn't sign, but he set up the business work behind the largest check ever written. It was a check for $9 billion in I think 9 billion, I think it was, in 2000.
9 billion, yeah.
9 billion in 2009, when there was a critical moment when I think Morgan Stanley in Asia was gonna fall if it didn't get an injection of cash, and it was on a Friday, and it was too late to do a transfer, and he was I think at Mitsubishi at the time, and the check that saved them it had to be a check because of the timing on the Friday or whatever the circumstances, and he was partly responsible for that check having been written. So anyway, he's really a major sort of business figure actually in Japan and elsewhere, and but also has this deep, deep, deep spiritual practice and life. He's a wonderful guy to be around. He's extremely fit and healthy at the age of 84, and you'd think he was 55 or something. He's very friendly and kind and thoughtful, and sort of a deep presence. You feel it when he enters the room. The room changes a little bit, and a lot of people report that, not just someone who is a student of his, like myself.
Just maybe one more thing on this question of why should an entrepreneur, or why should someone who is very focused on the business world or their career care about awakening and deeper meditation. And again, speaking from personal experience, like when I found out about 2 years ago that deeper meditation was a thing and where it could lead to, it felt a little bit like there was another whole subject. Like, so at school, right, in high school, you have chemistry, you have maths, you have English literature, you know, and it was like there'd just been this secret subject there all along that no one had ever mentioned or ever told me about, but was clearly, obviously worthy of exploration, but actually probably even more important because it was sort of fundamental to, it was underneath, you know, all the other ones in terms of its, like the kind of, you know, the sort of effect it would have on them. And yet, man, I'd spent all of my life to date just never knowing it existed. And suddenly it was like, man, I have to explore this. Mm-hmm. And so I think that for someone who has, you know, and I just, you know, of course, many entrepreneurs have this like sort of a curiosity, kind of experimental mindset, a desire to sort of investigate things. Like, this is the subject, right? This is the topic, your own mind. How could you not want to explore that? And so I think that's probably also just a piece of that puzzle.
Oh, Jack, that's a great answer. I totally agree with you. I want to just add that, you know, also it hasn't been that accessible until now. When I was 19 when I had a random moment of discovery of this other side of life, and I was just like, oh my God, this is what life is really about. And I'd never heard of it. And I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was the great reality of things, you know, but I had it was back in the early 80s and I had absolutely nowhere to turn. I didn't know where to go for guidance on it. So that's part of my own personal sort of mission, is actually to make this much more widely known, so that, because people can randomly awaken to it, and they do. I often have people writing to me about it. I want people to know it's real, and you know, and yeah, there are methods for not only uncovering it but integrating it if it happens, yes, and learning to live with it. And so I have that mission too, that it should be more widely known, just because, A, because it's real, but also B, because sometimes people stumble into it and they don't know what's happened to them. And it can be very worrying for some people. They think they're going mad, or no, they've just actually seen the way things really are. It's a bit like the Matrix. It's a little bit like the Matrix, except that it's not horrible giant insects ruling everything. Instead, it's a marvelous reality. It's a beautiful world that opens up. Yeah.
Yes, I'm always curious, why has this still been relatively unknown all along? For example, right now I'm actually convinced, I subscribe to this theory where many masters throughout history in different domains such as art probably were awakened beings. For example, masters such as Michelangelo. I was just in Florence the other day and learned that Michelangelo carved David freehand in his 20s. And he lived until his 80s, when the average age in his days were like 30 or 40 or 50 years old. And Nikola Tesla as well. Rumor has it that he designed everything in his own mind without the need of doing any experimentations at all. I'm not sure whether that's true. So if that's true, awakening seems to be this doorway that could unlock people's natural superpower or ability. Is it really bad to see this as such, or sell awakening as a doorway to unlock people's true potential? What's your take on this?
Yeah, I don't think it's bad at all. I think I think regardless of who we are, to get freer of the clamoring of our sense of self, you know, and the hunger and the yearning and the desperate need for this, it's a huge weight off us, off our hearts and minds, and we can be far more freely productive in positive ways, undoubtedly. I don't know. I mean, about the other masters of different arts and sciences. I don't know. I just don't know. I think it could be, but it doesn't have to be. There are great practitioners in the arts that I can think of who actually had quite unhappy lives and probably hadn't seen through the self, but they could make marvelous work. I'm sure they would be getting into flow states, no question. So they would have some significant experience of what it's like to be operating with much less sense of self when they're engaged in a project. But that's actually not quite the same thing as clearly seeing through the sense of self. But it's critical, I think, for any great project. So I would say, whether it's Michelangelo carving David freehand, which is a mind-blowing thought, actually, I agree with you, and in his 20s, that is spectacular. I didn't know both those facts about it. It is mind-blowing. But, we don't know that meant that he had seen that his sense of self was imaginary. We don't know that it means that. We can be pretty sure it means he knew how to be free of it when busy, at critical projects. And so I don't know. I would be cautious about saying, for sure he saw through it. I don't know. But for sure he knew how to not be weighed down by it and be free of it for periods of time. But that's, again, not the same as actually seeing what it is.
So there are tons of self-help books and manifestation books and YouTubers who are teaching the concept from the book The Secret to a very big audience, to my surprise. So apparently talking about manifestation and teaching people how to become richer and happier has a pretty wide appeal. So Henry, I'm just curious, as a Zen master, what's your take on manifestation?
Well, if that means like how to get rich in a nutshell, I would say it's beside the point. Because if you want that, that's fine. Don't harm anybody and pursue that. Fine. But it's like Jack said, there's a secret hidden subject to study, which is more important, which is who actually are we? And when we get clearer about that, when we see that we're not who we thought, our relationship to the world changes dramatically. And it becomes far more beautiful, and we're motivated much more to be helpful, and that becomes more important than our own gratification. So I would say, it's not my place to tell people what they should be spending their lives doing, actually, but of course that's their decision. But I do think that it's a mistake to confuse spirituality with wealth. I really think that's a mistake. The greatly developed spiritual beings had wealth, infinite wealth, without having a penny. And I think that's one of the things that's happened in, maybe it comes from California or something. I love California, but it's been a thing, this idea that if you're kind of spiritually developed, you'll be wealthy. I think it's a crazy idea. It's the opposite of the truth. It's if you're spiritually developed, you'll know that you're wealthy beyond measure in any moment, even if you have no wealth of the kind that the world recognizes. You'll actually be supremely wealthy. There's a great Zen koan, actually, where there's these two enlightened monks who are arguing with each other about who's wealthier. And the wisdom of it is that they're both dressed in rags, but they're completely wealthy because they've discovered what they really are is not separate from the whole world.
So, Henry, any advice for startup founders who may not find time to meditate regularly? Can you share some wisdom to help them get over the hump?
Yeah, I'd say that you don't find time. You just do it. You just do it. The moment you think of it, you do it. And you can do 10 or 20 minutes every day, you can, and it will be time beautifully invested. The ROI will be huge, so it's worth doing it.
Thank you. Jack?
Well, yeah, I'd just say download the way, and you don't have to think anymore. Just follow that path. We'll take you. We'll do the rest.
Thank you. So, thank you, Henry, Jack. Thank you so much for the wonderful time. It's been an amazing conversation with both of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Wei Ting.
Yeah, thank you for the questions. Really, really interesting.
Okay, take care.